gives me great pleasure in introducing Jon Vangorph, Head of Partnership for the VCS Emergency Partnership on building capabilities and community resilience inside and outside the VCS. Thank you, Jon.
Great. Thanks, Libby. Of course I have. So, I'm Jon, and thank you very much for having me, and a particularly big thank you to the Emergency Planning Society. It speaks, I think, volumes that I'm here, hopefully kind of representing as much of the voluntary and community sector as I can, and opening with what I want to share with you today on our organisation, but also the sector at large as well. So I made in a typical fashion some changes to my intro slide, which was initially I had just me, Jon, and the Head of Partnerships, but when I was thinking about human aspects and what makes me me, there are a few other titles that I've got. I don't have the post-nominals that some of you do as well, particularly Major Tim. It looks like he's maybe fallen over onto his typewriter, and a lot of the letters just seem to have spilled at the end of his name. But I'm Daddy, I'm Darling, I'm also pain in the backside to my lovely wife. I'm Painter, that's my nickname to my friends and has been for a good number of years because of my heritage being 3, 4, 5 generations ago a Dutch boy. But that's me. I'm the Head of Partnerships for the Voluntary and Community Sector Emergencies Partnership, or the EP, as I'll probably refer to us from now on. So, who are the EP? We are, and we should be, a tool for everyone in this room to access and to maximise the contribution of the voluntary sector in emergency preparedness, in planning, in response and in recovery. We formed in 2018 off the back of the terrible incidents of 2017, particularly the Grenfell Tower fire, Manchester Arena bombing, Westminster and London Bridge attacks, where leaders from some of the emergency response specialists from across the voluntary sector stood up, I think rightly so. I was working at the Red Cross at the time, and said actually we did great work in those responses and continue to do great work in communities, but there's an awful lot more that we could do to coordinate better across the sector, particularly with local grassroots organisations and also with those colleagues from local resilience forums as well. In 2020, we expanded quite heavily in regards to COVID and became a team from 2 in 2018 up to a team of around 20 who were focused around kind of gathering different insights, trying to build capabilities and make the connections between different organisations to meet the needs that the local voluntary community sector and others in category 1 and 2 partners were identifying over the course of that 1-2 year period. In 2022, we definitely struggled as a partnership to kind of maintain that momentum as COVID started to kind of dwindle in people's minds. And we shifted into more of a preparedness model, which given kind of the UK government resilience framework is really quite important for us because we're looking upstream more and more. We're trying to prepare, we're working with you in the room, we're trying to plan and prepare the voluntary sector in the best way possible. We're a growing network of some 280, we're probably up to 300 now, I'll have to have a check when I get home, but 300 odd organisations, formal partners of the third sector predominantly, but also from statutory agencies as well. But we engage with approximately 500 odd organisations over the course of any given year. We're focused on the person-centred, the human aspects, where we want to ensure that the third sector is maximising its contribution to the work of resilience and emergencies, providing compassionate response to everyone, regardless of their community, their interests, their strengths and their needs. And I mentioned strengths and needs together because we sometimes reflect on unmet needs, but we don't necessarily draw on the strengths of communities as well. Our work is focused in England. I know there are colleagues from the devolved nations in the room. What I would say is we're a pretty open partnership, and there are colleagues from Scottish Civil Contingencies team. We've had conversations with others from Northern Ireland, and Julie and I have caught up recently around what we may do in support of communities in Wales. But we're also aware that our partnership actually exists in some form in the devolved nations already. It might not be as formalised maybe. In some cases it probably is. So what we're trying to do, I think, in the devolved nations is trying to share learning from our experience in England of running a partnership that is across these different parts of the voluntary and community sector, and trying to support and learn from the devolved nations about how we can do better in England as well. We focus, that last bit, we focus on 3 things. Our pillars are around building capabilities, which I'll talk about a little bit later, building trusted connections, and the sharing and gathering of insights as well. So here are just a few of the organisations that make up our partnership. So a snapshot, I guess. Draw attention to a few that really founded the partnership back in 2018. So British Red Cross, Victim Support, and we'll hear from Victim Support later. The Emergency Planning Society have been a big help in terms of either indirect or directly like this, giving us the platform and space to talk about our sector. But then I think I'll draw attention as well to people in the room, to the smaller infrastructure organisations that are a really key part of, and have shown that through their response to COVID, and since then, they've worked in the community for years. The role that they play in being a convener, a network of networks. So us drawing on the strengths, I guess, of those organisations and trying to build up their role within emergency planning, resilience, and response as well. So very quickly, like the channels are the ways in which I guess we connect with partners and try to draw people together. I'm not an emergency planning professional at all, and no one within our team is, but we have experience of the sector. And I think what's important for us as an emergencies partnership team is that we recognise when to get out of the way. We recognise that we need to create spaces for people to come together, for the professional qualifications and experience that we see in this room to join up and marry alongside others in the communities where their specialism is their local community or their community, whatever that might be. So we run network calls every month. Again, anyone in this room could join them, that bring together kind of organisations, different partners from across the CEO, director level, around emergency resilience and response, with others from central government in particular as kind of keynote speakers, providing the insight and then having the debate about what we can then do as a sector. We have a bulletin which comes out at the middle of every month, which is a useful touch point just to share a few things. Quarterly capability building events, they're a key part of what we do in our organisation, and they are like extended periods of time, normally held virtually, that we feel are kind of like one of the kind of linchpins of our work, really, in trying to kind of establish what the problem is and trying to move forward to affect change. And then we organise ourselves also regionally as well. So quite big regions, so forgive me, but it's the North region, all of the Northeast, all of the Northwest. Midlands and the East together, which is pretty sizable. Southeast, which kind of donuts around London, which is one of its own areas. And then the Southwest. So massive regions, but we still feel it's quite helpful to arrange and organise some of our work at a regional level as well as at a national level. And then Always On, like our Always On channel, I guess, is our Slack. So we run a series of different Slack channels, and partners are kind of using that as an open space to kind of collaborate with each other outside of those kind of touch points. So I want to talk about the building capabilities bit, and in particular, I think, how we inform the things that we do by data, by practice, and by the people that we work with, the partners that we represent, the partners that we bring together from across the sector, but also from people in this room as well. I think like 4 key lessons that our head of capabilities has learned over the course of the last kind of few years. Like sustaining what works, like when partners identify things that they really enjoy and like about engaging with each other and building capabilities together, stick with it, develop it bit by bit, iterate it, but stick with it is really important. So gathering that feedback from partners is really important because that enables you to decide what does and doesn't need to change and happen. Diversifying the offer, I talked about the channels that we have, so having a variety of different channels for a variety of different partners with different time pressures, different periods of the day, week, month, year, where they can and cannot engage with us. So, and really trying to understand how communities kind of play into that. Engaging partners in their spaces. So it's great that we do what we do, I think, and try and hold these spaces for partners to come to us and come together. But actually, we as a partnership team need to understand that we need to do things like this. We need to come to the spaces that the Emergency Planning Society create. We need to go to partner conferences. We need to engage with communities in their homes. We need to engage communities where they are. And through that, kind of better understand, actively listen, and then hopefully meet those risks and needs with the strengths of other organisations and partners that we work with, or building capabilities over time. And then finally, just the creating and sharing of tools. So it's fine for us to talk about to point to particular resources or to help hopefully educate the partnership and its partners around what it may be able to do better. But I think where possible, trying to kind of create or share the tools that enable us to do that as well is really important. So enabling this idea that we will create a tool or a framework that people can go out and deliver themselves. So stepping more into a train-the-trainer approach as opposed to us being a trainer or people in the room maybe being a trainer. How do you empower your communities to deliver a lot of the emergency planning thought and process and thinking that you do day to day? How do you kind of cascade that across your communities a little bit more? And that's something we've been thinking quite heavily about. In action, I think this is one example of how we've kind of built capabilities and how that's kind of resulted in a really positive outcome. So last year, I would say through chance, but it was definitely by design. Marcus, our capability lead, had said, we really feel like we need to kind of focus on heat wave preparation and adverse weather for hot temperature preparation in the kind of March, April period. So we ran an exercise that focused on that. And from that, we kind of charged partners with thinking about how they plan for, in a more deliberate way, what is your heat wave plan? And a number of partners came back and said that they'd taken on board the learnings from that exercise and had done something with that. They'd engaged with local resilience forums and had conversations a little bit more deliberately, or they'd created something that was kind of guided by us around what you need to be thinking about, what you need to be doing, the connections you might need. And then July and August happened, and we all know what happened there. You know, a series of wildfires across the UK, you know, record-breaking temperatures, but those communities were far better prepared because of the updated plans or the new plans that they created to be able to respond and to be able to help their communities to recover. And then through October, we ran a series of regional and national spaces where we were sharing the lessons that we'd identified from the sector and passing them out across our partnership and wider. I want to talk about community resilience. I really love how much I hate this visual. But we're going to talk about community resilience under the kind of frame of, or the framing of co-production. So it won't be lost on people in the room. We've got 6 gentlemen at a global summit of women. And I don't know if that global summit over the course of the last kind of 10 years or so has improved how it is showing itself to the world, but I would hope that they start to rebalance the way in which they think and approach a global summit for women and having more of a voice for different communities. There's not a chance, really, that you cannot have a conversation. You can have a conversation about women without women in the room, and joined by a lot of you today. It's about co-production when it comes to community resilience, and I wanted to move on to that with that in mind. So, for us, community resilience, always with and alongside communities. It really, really underpins everything that we do when it comes to kind of building community resilience, and it will be for a lot of people in this room. We see real strength in diversity, and a lot of people in the room, I think, will say that as well. So, yes, it can be a challenge, and I've talked with many of you around kind of the challenges of engaging the voluntary and community sector. A colleague of mine describes the voluntary and community sector as a plate of spaghetti. It is really difficult sometimes to really grapple it and get hold of it. But when you do, it's pretty tasty. And I think a lot of people do recognise the strength and diversity when it comes to building community resilience. But something I think we need to focus more on within our partnership, and probably people in this room might agree, is recognising that and speaking to that in a meaningful way. Like this idea of it being like an improvement roller coaster, like the number of times I've looked back on documents from 10 years ago where people have raised the same issues and problems that I'm talking about now with the voluntary and community sector. We saw yesterday with the slideshow of different emergencies, like repeated emergencies that continually happen, although clearly there's some changes that are coming around through climate change and the introduction of AI and other threats. But I think it's up and down, it's really hard, and recognizing that and talking about that with communities is really important. You all here to listen to the particular human aspects of those communities that you really want to see improve, that you want to help improve. But it's going to be difficult. Being upfront and honest with people about that is really important. I studied at Manchester University 15 years ago. I did maths. I didn't do very well, which is why it doesn't appear on my post-noms, but I did get a few letters. I just don't shove them on. But I get really excited about equations. So yesterday, Marcus talked about a risk equation, and I sat up and started scribbling frantically about the things that I can think about. But a trust equation, this is something that some of you may have used before. I use it a lot. It's a tool that we use in our partnership. But thinking very deliberately about how we build trust, with it being so foundational across the way that we build resilience, we plan, we respond, we recover. So how credible are you in what you say? You know, do you come with evidence? Do you come with case studies? Do people believe what you say? Are you reliable? Do you do what you say you do? So it's all good and well that you've said all these things and you've come with great evidence, but are you going to follow up on that? You've said that you'll take away an action, you do something. Are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? How are you going to feed that back? The intimacy bit is really, really tricky, and I was talking to Rob from Essex County Council earlier. Over the course of the last couple of years, we've lost a bit of that, haven't we? Because so much of it is virtual. You know, for many of you, it'll be the first time that you've maybe met each other in years, maybe ever. But building that intimacy up across different partners and relationships is really tricky. We find that meeting in person does help, of course, but it's not always possible. We need to think about the climate and our impact on that as well. So finding different ways and tools to kind of build intimacy in a way that helps us to build trust. And then that kind of really important across all of it, and the equation's kind of sometimes talked in terms of altruism, sometimes it's talked around self-interest, but the key bit across building trust in this equation is that the other person really needs to understand that you're not in it for yourself, that you're going to give to them without keeping score. And I think that's one thing that we've kind of took away when it comes to this equation and the way that we use it in our work as a tool, is deliberately thinking about how we build trust within our partnership, but how we build trust between partners as well. So how do we broker the relationship between British Red Cross volunteers and React Disaster Response volunteers, where they operate and work in a very similar area, and there's probably a little bit too much competition and probably not enough collaboration. How do we broker that? We think about less self-interest. We think about being more altruistic. We talk about that within our work. The long-term investment, we heard it yesterday. People are going to talk about cash when it comes to the voluntary and community sector and the public sector, and I think that's completely fair. When it comes to building community resilience, it needs to be long-term investment, but not just financial, like time, data, effort, like really being there and present, listening to what communities say and want it to happen in their communities, and challenging them as well. Like, importantly, like, I'm not here talking about the voluntary and community sector saying that we do everything right. There's huge amounts that we get wrong and we need to improve on that. It's challenge and support from both sides. So the voluntary sector will challenge and support people in this room, vice versa. I think that needs to happen back to us. So a real strategic long-term investment in the time and capacity that people across our partnership kind of put into each other. Yeah, of course. Just wanted to mention practically our emergency planning tool, which is around how we layer different risks alongside different social indicators across communities, which I think is a really useful tool for people in this room to use. And I did just want to say, just to wrap up, like, I'm not going to do this, but it is a really interesting co-production video around blobs and squares. We don't need to play it now, but have a watch of it when you get a second. It talks about how different players within the space, when it comes to co-production, play up against each other. A lot of people in this room might see themselves as a bit of a square. I see myself as a bit of a square blob type person. But give a watch of it on your train journey back, maybe after today. It's a really humorous, but I think like insightful way of looking at how we can co-produce better as a sector alongside others in the public sector. That's our team. If ever you want to get in touch with us, see us as a tool, as I said. See the tools that we use as tools for you as well. But contact me in the first instance, or connect with anyone here. The slides will be made available. And thank you for your time.